It's Dublin City Centre and I'm here for the Dublin premiere of Dún and Ollie. This is a film drowning in nostalgia for a time gone by, a time when comedy was very different to what it is now. Comedy was simple, innocent, inoffensive. It didn't require a college degree or an awareness of the minutiae of politics to enjoy it or to understand it. Physical comedy, a lot of the time silent, without a single word, and then often, maybe after a very silent routine of maybe a minute, a single word would pack more punch than 1,000 would otherwise. I love this film, Dún and Ollie, not least because of this guy, Steve Coogan, who is one of my favourite comedians, especially with Alan Partridge. Please, can I have a second series? The pathetic TV host, who later becomes the pathetic radio DJ. It's 3:42 AM. and we're going to be interviewing Norfolk's youngest butcher. Certainly the material that made people laugh back then was so radically different to what people will laugh at now, or what people will expect in a modern comedy. Dún and Ollie has some lovely moments. Laurel and Hardy's unique type of physical humour, little or no dialogue, where they walked around in silence around the stage, and small little gestures were enough to trigger the audience to laughter, and they certainly were to this reviewer also.
That was pure magic. It's brilliant.
Laurel and Hardy's two wives act like a double Yoko Ono, in that they're destined to drive a very solid wedge between the romance which is going on between the two comedians, and it tends to succeed too. It causes significant trouble.
You could have long time ago said goodbye, Oliver.
That's all in the past.
It's often the case that there is quite a dark side to comedy, and this film is no exception. It is quite sad and pathetic at times, in that it isn't charting the rise, but it's charting the fall, and quite often excruciating and pathetic fall of one of the world's biggest comedy duos. It is quite heartwarming in that regard at the same time, because you see an enduring friendship between two, quite a troubled one, but yet a quite enduring friendship that lasts even beyond the grave. In that, we learn later on, and this is a historical fact, that Stan kept writing material for Laurel and Hardy even after Hardy's death. Loyalty is something that is a constant theme, because he refused to have a different partner perform it. So that material was never used. It's a sad and sometimes pathetic view of a career which is in decline, and a very sad, slow and agonising death. It was a glamorous time when comedy was delivered by men dressed in suits as opposed to hoodlums dressed for a felony. You would really wonder what Laurel and Hardy would think of modern comedy in both extremes, both the extremely offensive sometimes material, and then the flip side is the way people get extremely offended about material which isn't offensive at all, but in the modern era tends to trigger people who are looking for an excuse to be offended.
What Noel will do is a pastiche of an earlier joke, but delivered perhaps very cutely in a way that appeals to the working class, which won't be that fucking relevant in this room. So, go. Did it ring any bells? Oh fuck, shit. No, good luck being more offensive than that, son. Ta-da! The backhanded compliments they sometimes get from people they meet can serve like a knife in that already decaying carcass of a career. When people say, I think it's fantastic that after all these years you're still doing the same material. And it must be a bit like music stars when 20, 30 years later they're trying to release new material and the crowd are shouting for their very first single, which is perhaps their only hit. They do some of the gags that Laurel and Hardy did throughout the show, so again, very simple, not obtuse, very simple and direct, no nuance to those gags. So when they're on stage singing a song, he gets a hammer, bashes your man over the head, and the tone of his voice increases the more he bashes him over the head. Quite slammer humour, quite literally.
We'd like to finish now with a little dance.
You sure? I can do it.
I'll miss us when we're gone.
so will you.
When the wives come back, they use it as an opportunity to do the car door trick, which is another very simple but hilarious gag. And it comes down to as simple as when they're on stage, the classic "look out behind you" that is so beloved of pantomimes 50 years later. The Robin Hood scene where they flip it and say he's stealing from the poor and giving to the poor, so he's cutting out the middleman. Loyalty is a constant theme throughout this. It does cause a spark between the two and they remember as far back as 20 years previous when Stan worked with a different partner, and that caused a certain amount of tension between the two ever since.
You're not still carrying that around, are you? Because I went ahead and did a picture with someone else 16 years ago.
You and Harry are just going to be great together.
Couldn't sleep for days when they told me what you did.
And I couldn't sleep when I did it.
And when it's obvious that Hardy his health is failing, the question comes up as to whether he can work with somebody else. And history shows that he refused. He turned down every opportunity. In fact, and it's quite heartbreaking, he continued to write work for Laurel and Hardy after Hardy's death, but it was never used because he couldn't bring himself to work with another character.
You betrayed me. Betrayed our friendship. I loved us.
You loved Laurel and Hardy, but you never loved me.
So John C. Reilly was the only one to get a nomination for this. I'm sure Steve Coogan will be a little bit disappointed with that. He got a nomination in the Golden Globes, and really he put an awful lot of effort into this, and shooting was really restricted because he spent a whopping 4 hours in makeup every day. It's a little bit as torturous as the makeup for Churchill, which also got an Oscar for Gary Oldman. So that's going to set a precedent of people pushing the boat out and looking for increasingly ridiculous makeup times in with the makeup artists, which will either lead to a lot more good work or perhaps torturous work for makeup artists in Hollywood. I was unaware of this fact until I actually saw this film, but Laurel and Hardy's last show was actually in Dublin, and it's a matter of a lot of pride really that was the case. Hardy gets sick, and I'm willing them on, hoping they can make it to Ireland, and I hadn't even been born yet. Which shows how invested personally I was with the story, and the fact that their last show, well, it appears that their last show was in this city, is a matter of a lot of pride really, and it's fantastic. In the Olympia apparently.
In the pale moonshine, our hearts entwine, where she carved a name and I carved mine. Oh June, just like the mountains are blue, like the pine, I am lonesome for you.